Also got that guy that always says I sound like Russell Brand. What a fucking cunt, man. That's nothing like...
Yeah, you sound nothing like Russell Brand.
Come on, mate.
No, you have to ask foreigners like this, but no, obviously you don't.
Yeah,
but,
obviously. It's obvious.
Like I do. No offence.
What does Russell Brand sound like nowadays? I haven't listened to him since he went insane.
A lot like Kyle.
I remember quite squeaky.
He's like, oh god, yes, I'm really like, oh god, yeah, I'm really posh, isn't he? Like, oh god, yeah, I'm so surreal.
I thought he was like,
I
thought he was fake. I thought he was fake.
He's like Alex Jones now, isn't he?
Yeah.
I guess he's kind of like, yeah, God, yeah. No, you're right. He is a bit like hands, a bit like
Kyle, when are you going to start doing the impression
though? Fuck off. Fuck off.
Hello, one and all, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. And some other asshole is back to make our brief time on this show a living nightmare. Kyle McLachlan. Welcome.
Hello.
Wow, very meek.
Boys.
Always trying to subvert expectations, Kyle. Coming with the meekest hello I've ever heard from you.
Hello. How's it going, alright?
Okay. I'm sure we'll bring this sort of oi-oi-oi-ness out of you at some point soon. On today's episode, Kyle is here, of course, to discuss the heavyweight boxing title fight rematch from last weekend, Alexander Usyk versus... I hate to say it this way, but because I have two Englishmen on, Anthony Johsua. Fantastic fight, very interesting, but because Edwards Usman was so stupid, Kyle has also agreed to discuss last week's UFC 278 main event with us as well. So Kyle, thank you for the huge waste of time that you're about to invest yourself in. And I'm very, very excited to hear your thoughts on both of these fights. And it's good to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me, Connor, and Phil, obviously. I'm really excited to talk about these two fights. Obviously, love talking about even more, but more on that later. And, man, just can't wait to hear your thoughts as well. I don't think I've actually seen too much from either of you guys. I've seen a few opinions here and there about the Edwards fight, but I think both of you have recently caught up with... Usyk and Johsua yourselves, so be interested to see hear your thoughts on that.
You know us, we're Philistines. We watch the UFC events like as close to live as we can, and then boxing is like a Sunday evening kind of treat.
I mean, I don't. I watch both as a Sunday treat.
That's perfect.
True. Well, no, it's different for me. We'll get to it, but obviously we're going to talk about UFC first. But actually, for a bit of context. Segued pretty nice for me this weekend. I stayed up to watch the boxing, and basically once that was over, the prelims were just beginning, so I had enough fire in the belly to stay up for those. So it was all good.
Nice. Well, okay, so I figure we'll start off with the UFC, and we will get to Usyk Johsua 2 in segment 2, and then Kyle is going to leave us, and Phil and I are going to touch on the two other most relevant fights from the UFC 278 undercard, those being Jose Aldo versus Merab Dvalishvili and Luke Rockhold versus Paulo Costa, a fight more himbo-ish and stupid than we could have possibly imagined, and also awesome. I would put this in the same category as like a Pena versus Nunes kind of thing, where it was like it reached such heights of simultaneous stupidity and brilliance that I can't help but love it to death. But let's start with the UFC main event. And Kyle, since you are our guest, and I'm sure you will have the most entertaining thoughts, introduce us to it. What do you take away from this fight as a whole?
Obviously, Leon Edwards wins the UFC welterweight title with a late fifth round knockout over Kamaru Usman. I think I've actually been on before for another Usman fight. I can't remember what we spoke about, but I'm pretty sure we actually discussed Kamaru together as well before. But I guess every episode blends into another. But for me, it's a personal experience, this fight, because I've got a very strange relationship with Leon Edwards, and I find Leon a he's a consummate professional in the cage. Lots of nice technical areas that he's got. I love his clinch game. Love how he uses it to frame off. Love his kicking game. Nice counter boxer. Good defensive grappler. But Leon remains, to me, one of the most frustrating fighters on the roster.
Yeah.
And even winning the title with a highlight reel knockout, which is probably going to be one of the most repeated knockouts in UFC history.
Yeah.
He still completely vindicated me as being a Leon Edwards hater, because he had long stretches of this fight of doing fuck all. And I don't really feel that the result is replicable, if not in a rematch, then certainly going ahead in terms of giving Leon an illustrious reign. Am I right in saying that? Do you think this was... I'm not going to say a fluke. Definitely not a fluke. We can talk about the technical details. That shot was definitely set up well. When Leon started kicking in the 5th round, started, bringing Usman's hands down, expected body kicks, and then obviously went up high. Lovely set up, don't get me wrong. But that's not indicative of Leon generally as a fighter. Yeah. And I still think that some of the little quirks he has, little inherent flaws he has of taking rounds off, what I call round snoozing, were still there for all of us to see.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I agree with your assessment completely. I don't think it's replicable. Usman is already opened as a pretty heavy favorite for a rematch, and why not? You remind me of a classic argument with the good doctor, Patrick Wyman. We argued over the definition of the term fluke after Uriah Hall knocked out Gegard Mousasi.
Remember it well.
Yeah, and I was like, it's not a fluke. Now that Pat has been dead these many years, I feel safe saying that that was a fluke. This was a fluke. by any working definition of a fluke, right? Was it intended?
Because he was throwing a spinning back kick to the body and Gegard ducked into it.
Right. Exactly.
Totally different. Come on, Connor.
Yeah. So only because all Pat can do is roll in his grave. I'm willing to say it now. And by any meaningful definition of what a fluke is, did Leon do anything in this fight other than survive, which I guess credit to him for that led to that outside of the sort of immediate setup of the kick, which I agree was good. Well set up, very well executed, extremely fast, like really, really nice kick. Did anything in the 4.5 rounds before that final minute tell you that was going to happen, tell Leon that it was going to happen? No. He had a good idea, and he got lucky.
Up, Connor.
What's that?
He was setting it up.
Yeah. He was lulling Kamaru into a sense of false security.
No, I think he did. Because, sorry to interrupt you, but I would love to hear your take on this. In the minute or so preceding to the knockout, we have a snap kick to the gut where the toes go in, and Kamaru says it's a low blow and needs time off. Not sure if it was. We get a body kick as well. And I think those kicks are what have got Kamaru thinking about the kicks to the body.
And Leon was feinting the kick before throwing it, and he covered it nicely with the left hand. No, all that I agree with. It was set up tactically. Did anything strategically in the larger fight? I mean, anything that led to it seems like an accident. Like, I do, in fact, think Kamaru was lulled into a sense of false security. I think, in fact, we're going to get into this, but there were some critiques for Trevor Whitman, which I loved his advice for Kamaru going into the 5th round. He was like, when you got him up against the cage, because in the final 30 seconds of round 4, Kamaru was just unleashing combinations. Leon's ass was against the cage, and Kamaru was just lighting him up. Body, head, really great punching attack. And Trevor Whitman said, hey, more of that. When you get him up against the cage, don't just hold him box. And then some people who are geniuses, who the 50% of these kind of people who didn't immediately say that this was obviously fixed, were like, damn that Trevor Whitman. He told Kamaru Usman to stop wrestling and to box. He did not tell Kamaru Usman to give Leon space and let him fight, just in the middle of the cage without any pressure, which is what was winning him the fight. So I think it really did have something to do with Usman feeling like, okay, show me what you got. Like, you haven't done a damn thing all fight. I don't have to worry. I can take my foot off the gas. I think he did that to an extent. And I agree that in that minute of space, Leon did a really nice job setting that kick up. But the rest of the fight was a failure.
Ooh,
yeah,
not failure.
Well,
It wasn't a fate. I mean, technically, at least you can say Leon won 2 out of the 3 rounds. But yeah, for me, this one got spoiled because I was out on Saturday and Sunday.
That's a bummer because seeing it live was a gut punch.
Mm-hmm. AJ Usyk got spoiled as well, but I didn't really mind that much because I was just like, yeah, sure, that was probably going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
But we spoke about this last week, and we had a lot of like criticisms and worries for Kamaru Usman. Basically, has his wrestling deteriorated? Is he just falling in love with being a boxer or a striker because he's physically deteriorated or tactically deteriorated? He's decided it's some way of making himself safer. Mm-hmm. Is his durability starting to fade a bit? Which is actually still a valid question after this. Sure. But basically,
although who the hell would have survived that kick other than like Yoel Romero?
Yeah,
it was a perfect shin to the jaw head kick. Perfect.
Beautiful, beautiful. Crow Cop couldn't have done it better himself.
Absolutely.
Gonzaga couldn't have done it better himself.
No.
Oh, Phil, you nasty man.
Well, people were mentioning like the biggest head kick knockouts in UFC history, and I was like, it's got to be one of them. But anyway, but yeah. So all I heard was the head kick knockout last round. That was what I heard someone saying, and so I was primed to come in and expect a performance where Leon Edwards looked good and Kamaru Usman looked bad, and instead, I thought that Usman really debunked a lot of the potential criticism.
I agree.
I think in a lot of ways, Leon, I think, is the anti-Colby for Usman, in that Colby can suck him into kind of awful, messy fights and, largely kickboxing matches. But against Leon, he had just one of the most well-synthesized performances that we've seen from him as a championship fighter, and honestly, that we've seen from him basically since his first fight with Leon Edwards.
Yeah.
He was moving back and forth between the clinch, and as you said, with the dirty boxing, he was wrestling a lot and well. He was getting significant portions of top control against a very good wrestler. I just thought Kamaru Usman looked great.
And overall,
then, as you said,
constant methodical pressure, which was the other thing we were concerned about. It was a nice, measured, but aggressive performance.
Yeah, we said that, if he gets into trouble, Kamaru Usman is going to realize that he can just run Leon Edwards into the fence like he used to in their last fight. And he didn't need to get into trouble. He sort of did, but in that he got taken down in the first round and got into and got his back taken. But even before then, he clearly understood how the directionality of this one should play out.
Yeah.
Before you jump in, and Phil, can I just say something which extends what you're saying now? Where I saw it was a really nice blending of the two things that Usman does well, that he rarely puts together well. Mm-hmm. For a while, he was ditching the wrestling, becoming this sort of janky stand-up guy when he was still really finding his feet as a striker, in my opinion, even as champion. Yeah. We were seeing progression from fight to fight, and sometimes a regression. And in this one, he really blended all the facets of his style together. And I thought, as you say, Phil, as champion, one of his best performances up until the knockout.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And conversely, actually kind of a pretty bad performance from Leon Edwards.
I agree.
A
typical Leon Edwards performance, shall we say?
I don't even really think it was in some ways, because we also talked about certain elements of his game which weren't really there that much. His
Agreed.
ability to blend striking and the clinch was really lacking. His ability, he wasn't elbowing, he was kneeing a bit in the clinch, but he wasn't throwing any of those kind of Leon Edwards elbows and frames and so on.
Yeah.
Admittedly, this might have been because Usman was dictating a lot of the clinch exchanges, but it really seemed like he seemed like the harsher geared fighter. He was clanking between the wrestling and the striking much more than Usman was. And, if you'd said that there was a technical advantage for Leon, you might have said that it was there, in the ability to smoothly shift between the two. But he was either wrestling largely fruitlessly, apart from that first takedown, or he was on the feet. So aside from the fact that I sort of talked up his ability to win, to know when he's winning rounds and to change his pace, and that he didn't do that at all. He just kind of steadily lost rounds 2 through 4.
Mm-hmm.
Aside from that, yeah, I just felt like it was a very binary performance from him, and not in a good way at all.
Yeah, I'll just add my potentially meaningless nuance to that. I think it was a typical Leon Edwards performance, and that this is a style matchup that is just not that good for him. Like, as in the first fight, he can compete with Kamaru, and he will impress you with his defense and things like that, but Kamaru has the ability to put him in a purely defensive frame of mind. And the fact is, like, this is Leon doing pretty typical Leon things and just not being given the opportunities that he gets against other fighters. And specifically regarding the clinch, for sure, it was Usman just having so much initiative, forcing Leon to think entirely about not getting out wrestled, to the extent that it was in fact Kamaru who could make the decision to tactically break the clinch and land strikes on the break. He was way more effective at getting back from the wrestling to the strikes. As you said, normally that's Leon's thing, but normally he has an ability, either a physical advantage, a technical advantage. He's the one forcing the clinches. There's something going on where the opponent isn't just blanketing him every time that they connect, where he can actually set up those positions. I just think he was like, if I think about setting up frames and something, I'm going to get taken down. Usman just makes him very reactive, more than he would like to be. And so he loses. He looked much the same. I would agree with Kyle that it was typical, but against Usman, his style just loses rounds instead of narrowly winning them, which I think is, once again, was a correct assessment by you. He's a good round winner if you let him.
Phil's correct. There was definitely elements of Leon's game missing as well. With obviously with the clinch work, some nice intercepted knees. Don't get me wrong, some nice work. Leon was basically, apart from that first round where he out grappled Kamaru, really impressive by the way. That trip, lovely stuff. The second round I thought was fantastic. One of my favourite rounds of the year actually. Really nice back and forth. But that's when Leon really was shining as a counter striker. Really nice stuff. Kamaru at some point tried to barrel in with like a naked low kick, and Leon caught him with like a check hook, with like a counter hook rather. Really nice stuff. That was a really nice competitive round. For Kamaru, we might want to touch on this, but a lot of shithousery from both guys in this fight.
Oh yeah. When
Leon's foot got caught, I don't really like to see that. I loved the combination that Kamaru put on him, but the guy was literally fucking stuck in the cage. Guys, you don't hate each other. There's no need to fight like that. But then, grabbing the gloves, and Leon, he loves poking people in the eye. No sympathy.
Yeah, this is one where there were so many people trying to be angry at one fighter or the other. Like, a lot of people just have a problem with Kamaru Usman, I guess, because he's really good and he's not charismatic. And some of his fights are boring. But, I guess, you're rooting for Leon Edwards here, so, But...
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But people were trying to...
Famous charismatic Leon.
Yeah, charismatic action fighter Leon Edwards. And people were like, oh, Usman with all the fence grabbing. It's like they both cheated so much.
There's so much cheating.
So much. They both grabbed the fence. Leon grabbed the gloves. Leon poked Usman in the eye. He did kick him low. That last one that the commentators were skeptical about, and you just expressed skepticism, Kyle, his ankle clanged into Usman's cup. It's enough. It doesn't have to be a direct hit. We don't have boxing groin guards, which are, even if you take a direct shot to the crotch in boxing, those cups are way better designed to withstand that kind of
Connor, I've been advocating for the metal Muay Thai cup for years, mate. You know this.
Yeah, but even then...
Apparently it's easier to, armbar people with it.
Yeah, you can...
Okay. Didn't know that. That's nuance. I didn't know. Thank you.
Yeah, apparently you can basically... It's much easier to just use it as a lever point to break stuff over.
It's a brutal filth.
Of course.
But it is also much better protection. But even that is still not as sturdy as a... Boxing groin guards are a miracle. They are the best groin protection. You just can't wear them in MMA because they would restrict your mobility. But... So yeah, there was just a shitload of fouling on either side. It was an incredibly dirty fight.
Kamaru was easily able to get on Leon's hips, and I think that was probably what, as I say, as you guys have alluded to, what negated Leon's clinch game a bit. Although he had moments, he got Kamaru's back at some stage, and I'm not talking about the first round. I think it was maybe the third or fourth where he briefly sort of got round on Kamaru. Didn't make nothing of it, but it was nice to see that Leon was still capable of getting somewhere with his up against the fence. But generally, Usman was getting in on his hips too easily, running him against the cage. He always set it up with just simple level change. He got him thinking about the jab, easy level change. But at one point, he sort of reached out to fake a level change, and Leon was right there, and he just run him into the cage.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Easy.
I saw
really easy.
So who was it that posted that? It might have been Dare, I think, on Twitter. But yeah, it's just that Usman is faking a level change by reaching out to touch Leon's thigh, and then he realizes that Leon isn't reacting to it at all, and then he's just like, oh well, might as well just grab it then if I'm down here.
Yeah.
While
I'm down
here,
look,
I find Leon and naturally, and I think if we talk about him as a fighter. On my own podcast, don't want to plug it just yet, but on my own podcast,
plug
I said
it all you want.
There are no perfect fighters. And in many ways, as a technical fighter, Leon Edwards is fantastic. But his flaw, and the comparison I made, Connor, was in boxing, you often have a lot of big punchers that have poor chins or bad defense. Or you might have a fighter with great stamina and a great chin, but maybe he's not a big puncher.
Sure.
And with Leon Edwards, he has an inherent mental block, an inherent passivity.
Yeah.
He's a very passive fighter.
Yeah.
And I think it's due to nerves. I think it's due to concerns. I'm not sure if it's due to concerns about his chin, maybe. Brian Barberena hurt him 5 years ago. Nate Diaz hurt him. Maybe he's just worried about prolonging exchanges, so he's happy to skirt around on the perimeter and not get involved. But that's his flaw.
Leon, to me, looks like the kind of guy where every time he gets hurt, it is partially his concern for his chin that causes... I don't think he has a bad chin. I think he...
Yeah, he's 4-ounce gloves and chin to chin. It happens, you know what I mean? You're going to get hurt, aren't you?
Yeah, and he tenses up in the pocket. He is anxious when it's an exchanging range, and so often he just takes a clean shot very badly, whereas Kamaru can be sometimes quite awkward in the pocket, but you've seen him take some thunderous shots because he's got his eyes open and his position is good. He's not over-tensing when he knows he's going to get hit. It's something that revealed itself in this fight. It was as instrumental as just the wrestling advantage was just the fact that Usman is arguably no better than Leon in the pocket in terms of the number of mistakes he makes, but he was way more comfortable there. And it just made it easy for him to pressure because Edwards was always the one who would be first to decide. He would just lose a game of chicken, essentially, again and again. He would always be the first one to decide to give ground, and Usman just wasn't willing to back off. He was willing to take shots more than he was willing to back off until the last 2 minutes of the fight, really. Even the fifth round started.
So you think that was... Sorry, Phil, I was going to ask you this, and Colorado. The reason I was talking about Leon's being so passive, I think that's sort of why he gave up those third and fourth round. Usman was able to just steamroll him, essentially. But do you think that's why Kamaru was happy sort of languishing at kicking range? Because he thought,
I think
this guy ain't going to do fuck all. He ain't going to do anything.
I think he was a little tired. The end of the fourth round after that big flurry, Usman was, understandably a little tired. I do think the elevation here played some role in several of these fights. But also I just think he wasn't concerned. He had been having his way for at the point where he kind of took his foot off the gas, 3.5 rounds essentially straight.
So Leon accidentally lulled him into a false sense of security. Is that what we're saying?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean...
Bonkers.
Because that's the thing. The other thing is, obviously, we've all seen the videos on Twitter with the Rocky music and so on, with the corner asking for Leon Edwards to come out for the fifth round. But
imagine if the fight in the Rocky movies looked like this. Imagine if this was Rocky. You're I'm rooting for this underdog, and he just doesn't fucking do anything.
But that's the thing, is that the fifth round is not exactly, it's not Lawler coming out after Condit. Right. It's not Leonard coming out after Hearns. Right. It's not someone who's throwing it all out there on the line. Agreed. It's him doing a little bit more But you feel like he's probably doing a little bit more because Usman is letting him.
Yeah,
I feel like if Usman kept the same pace up, Edwards would not have particularly fought. Wouldn't have had the same opportunities, and probably just wouldn't have even thrown at that kind of pace.
The fifth round.
That's the thing, is that Usman can simply just cap him.
Yeah. The fifth round started pretty much exactly as the fourth round ended.
Yeah.
Usman comes out, he's pressuring, he's putting combinations together, he gets Edwards to the fence almost immediately, He starts wrestling him. Like half the round is gone before Usman's like, it's done. And that's when Edwards, when given the chance, does do a noticeable bit more. But again, like in the vacuum of Usman just no longer really taking the fight to him, that's when he's able to set things up. He needed that space and that time, I think. So,
can I ask you both a question, a serious question?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think, really, even with the discussion we just had, these are inherent flaws of Leon Edwards? Do you think that maybe there's a small chance? I could probably name you 2 fighters off the top of my head, maybe not even that, who have actually undergone such a change. But do you think that maybe he'll know how that knockout felt and maybe start going, do you know what, I actually enjoyed that, I might actually start doing a bit more?
No.
Do you think there's a chance? I'm not saying to become a blood and guts warrior.
A chance.
Just by being more proactive. During rounds.
A chance, yes. And in the same sense that there is a chance that, like, I don't know.
You give him the confidence.
Something improbable, for my very good metaphor. A small chance, I would say. Maybe.
I don't believe it myself.
I think it's pathological.
It's an interesting question.
I think the way he fights is pathological. What do you say, Phil?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. I mean, the main thing is that his team has to go back and look at this. And, they've now fought Kamaru Usman for the best part of 8 rounds.
Yeah.
And they just...
And they've what?
They have to say, whatever else we do in this next fight, you have to come forward. You cannot get back, because we've talked about this when he fought RDA. It wasn't his footwork or anything that made him able to diffuse RDA's clinch and wrestling game. It was simply the fact that he was bigger than him and could outcompete him in the clinch. Is that he got backed into the cage all the time in that fight, but then he simply won the clinch exchanges.
Right.
His team just has to look at that and say, that is not going to fly. Their entire camp has to be focused on keeping his back off the fence.
Yeah. Who were you thinking of, Kyle, that has made a change like that? Anyone who comes to mind?
Wow, I've been a complete weirdo here. Eugene Creaky, who's probably more French way to pronounce that. If I think the podcast down mine, Luca Bourdon, where he would be able to tell me to say it. But known somewhat as a pure boxer prior to World War One, he was shot, I think, by a sniper and had a load of his face blown off. And when he came back, he looked completely disfigured. But he also fought a lot more aggressively. And if you watch footage of him, there's no footage of him prior to World War One, but there's enough text and writing on him. But if you actually watch him when he eventually won the world featherweight title against Johnny Kilban, he was like a Maidana-esque, marauding, overhand right-slinging pressure fighter. And I think there is a very good chance that he came back from the war changed and became completely different as a fighter.
So all Leon needs is a truly remarkable near-death experience.
Hey, look, it's just one I could think of. I mean, we're probably going to talk about him later, but even though he has shown elements of pressure fighting in the past, Tyson Fury, mainly known as an outside fencer type,
sure,
and a counter puncher, now everyone seems to think that he is a marauding pressure fighter. He certainly showed facets of that before, don't get me wrong, but that style that he's had in the last couple of Wilder fights, that now defines him as a stylist. Again, not as completely as much of an overhaul as it would be to see Leon Edwards suddenly turn into Nick Diaz, but I'm not saying that he needs that. I just think he just needs to be a bit more confident, a bit more proactive, and I think he could probably keep Kamaru off with a his jab, which was really sharp when he utilised it, which was rare. And as I say, kicking game's good, and Kamaru Usman, he's going to be more wary of that now. I guess really that's one thing we haven't really touched on is him. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on Usman going forward, because we haven't spoken about that at all, really.
Well, I'll add one more thing about Leon. First of all, I mean, I think the only Usman barely has to adjust for the second fight. Like, I'll do the same stuff and just literally do not let Leon
don't get knocked out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he can't kick me if I'm pushing it backwards literally the entire time. And hopefully we won't be in Salt Lake City, so that should hopefully be a little bit easier. I'll say I think it's much more likely that Leon. He reminds me more of another fighter, and this connection was made particularly resonant on this card. One of the most memorable moments, I think, maybe after round 4, maybe after round 3. Who hops on the mic? But technical analyst for the UFC, Dean Thomas. And Dean Thomas says, I think quite accurately, Leon is broken. And do you know how I can tell? He won't look his coaches in the eyes in the corner. And I thought, how do you know that, Dean? Why does that? Is anything familiar about that expression on a fighter? Who has Dean Thomas coached that he's had about 90 rounds of seeing them utterly mentally broken? Yeah. I think Leon is much more Tyron Woodley than he is Bill Creaky or whatever the man who got his face shot off was called.
Eugene.
Sorry. Gene Creaky. I think
Eugene. If I have some respect for
we're friends now.
For 100 years,
we're friends now. I give him a nickname, Gene. You know, it's
okay. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, that's just casual.
Yeah, just
apologies.
So yeah, I think it's entirely pathological for Leon. I would love to see him make that change, but I think if anything, these kinds of results where you do everything wrong, and then I mean, this is a front runner, Phil, for the Handies for the Hey That Worked award.
Oh, 100%.
This is basically a lock. I think a Hey That Worked kind of performance is exactly the wrong kind of performance to give someone like a confidence and change them. I mean, sometimes it does, but if you're Leon Edwards, you're thinking, oh, so it worked. Like all the stuff I was doing was okay because I got the win. And
now he can think, well, I used to try and win rounds, but maybe I don't need to do that anymore.
I mean, honestly,
maybe I can just knock everyone out with my power.
Honestly, I would love Yoel Romero, Leon Edwards more. If he was just like went full on sniper, where he was just trying to land a shocking kill shot 5 times around, that might be kind of cool.
Joe called him Joe, my good mate Joe. Joe Rogan called him a sniper, and I was like, for fuck's sake, Joe. Yeah. He hadn't sniped anyone for fucking years, man. And then he does that, and I was like, oh, a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah. I mean, if he was a sniper, it's been with rubber bullets for most of his UFC career.
Yes.
Like, people are like, ow. Jesus, man.
Moments.
Stop that.
Moments, don't get me wrong. But it's just, I think that's why everyone's been completely swept up with this, because for the MMA fan, it seems improbable who it happened to and who did it. And for the layman, it's a really cool, easily memeable moment. As I say, we've seen the video with Rocky music on, which actually got me, for someone who's hated Leon for years, I was like, oh, God, my boy Leon, good lad. But, you know, he's been a source of frustration for me because I know he's capable of more. And if nothing else, even if he loses the rematch, he could always say that he did it. He won the championship. So It's not been for now. And it couldn't happen to a nicer bloke.
Hey, man, a part of me still likes Leon. Like, it took me a very long time to turn into a full hater because I like head case fighters. Like, I'm if I were competing in MMA, oh my God, I would be such a head case. Like the way that pressure and competition and expectation can get to me, I understand that. But yeah, it's you just see enough of it where you're like, okay, you're not going to change. You're not going to break through. Look, Chito Vera can change. You know, Anthony Smith can change. Some of these, Kyle, you have to come back on when we talk about the next Chito fight. Because I know you think of him quite highly now, and Phil hates him now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I listened to the podcast last week, and Phil, I assumed you were doing a bit.
It kind of is, but it's like
I'm definitely leaning into it.
Yeah, but he also...
I don't want to get into it because it's not a Chito Vera podcast, but again, my feeling is that with certain matchups, this kind of style is not conducive to sort of continued success. And at some point, you're going to meet someone where you just run out of time.
Yeah.
If you're waiting...
That very nearly happened to him.
It very nearly happened to Leon. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Fucking hell. But, you know, with Chito, he is reliant on punctuating rounds with big moments.
Yeah.
And you're going to have fights where you don't get enough opportunity to do it.
Right. Or you just can't hurt your opponent or whatever. Yeah.
We will be talking about
Phil,
Jose Aldo Marabdashvili later on
well,
this episode.
Yeah,
that's right.
Exactly. But I still think those fighters are cool. But Leon wasn't cool, but he should have been, because I said earlier, he does a lot of things that I really like. But he's a round snoozer, and I can't abide that.
Yep,
he's
totally agree.
It reminds me of kind of Chad Dawson.
Oh, that's such a good comparison.
Takes rounds off.
Yeah.
You can rate him when he's doing it.
Yeah.
And he is passive to the point of that he makes fights fights that should be easy.
Yeah.
End up being more difficult for him.
Yeah. Chad Dawson had a lot of those, like, sort of, like Michael Moorer moments where he's just like,
there's another one.
He's just a head case who just, like, shuts off. Like, there's too much pressure and he just can't make a decision. He just gets, trigger shy, I guess. It's
strange but compelling.
It is.
And now we have a champion that is a round snoozer.
Yeah.
In one of the marquee divisions. Again, great guy, Leon, and an amazing story. But given who he is and his background, you think he'd be a fucking badass, Leon Edwards. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he's not. He's like a bit of a point fighter. I mean, as I say, transitional work in the clinch is phenomenal.
Yeah.
He has so many, for a British fighter, and Phil, we've had a lot of woes over the year with not many elite level fighters. He goes completely against the grain of what we tend to produce. He's a fantastic, multifaceted fighter who can blend all these different elements of MMA, and he's strong in so many phases. But he has a fatal flaw, and that is he is passive to the point of, for a fan of his, someone who should be a fan of his, he's so bloody frustrating. But I haven't got anything else to say about the bloke. I am genuinely happy for him, even though I like Kamaru Usman. Just really happy for Leon, because as much as I don't think he deserved a title shot. It's kind of weird. I feel like he really deserves to win.
And he's got it now. He's got another chance to surprise us and be like, "Hey, look at champion Leon as something different." I don't expect it, but that'll make the fact of it happening all the more fun and satisfying. Like, I would love to see Leon turn that corner and become a fighter that I can really root for again. I mean, but nothing personal against the guy. I've just seen too many fights that make me mad.
And if nothing else, he pulls tremendous performances out of Kamaru.
Yeah, absolutely. Kamaru looked great.
I think there's no, because we were worried that it might be a bit dull this time, but it wasn't dull. It was great. Yeah. It was a really cool performance. It was just, mostly one that came from Kamaru Usman with two very notable exceptions.
Yeah.
Well, actually, funny enough, before the fight, I was really pissed off. And this is interesting from a narrative standpoint. I was really pissed off because 170 has needed new blood for a really long time.
Yeah.
And now it's coming. It's coming. And I thought, well, if Leon somehow wins, we're going to have a bloody rematch.
Yeah.
It's going to hold up Khamzat Chimaev or Shavkat Rakhmonov or someone more interesting getting a title shot. But actually, now it's happened. More than happy for a rubber match. More than happy to give those lads a bit more time to sort of get bedded in and hone their skills a bit more against the best fighters at 170, of which there aren't many. So it should be somewhat interesting other matchups that could be made.
Yeah. But
actually not at all bothered now about the rubber match. Actually a fight I'd really like to see. I do think that these guys have really got a score to settle now. And not to use cliches, but given the ebb and flow of both of their fights, give me another one.
I love a series that is actually compelling. I mean, I don't give a shit to see Kamaru Usman just fight Jorge Masvidal again because people care, but like a compelling series. I would also watch Usman fight Covington again. Like, they have good fights, it's whatever. I love a good rivalry.
That's a step too far.
I'm just saying, man. I like combat sports for the stories and following these characters. And what's better in fight sports than a rivalry? Like, come on. So we're gonna have to wrap this up. We're already at like 39 minutes. Just on this, it's gonna be a long one, folks, because we still got to hit Usyk versus Joshua after this. Kyle, before we go to break, and then you'll get another chance later, tell people where your podcast is and what it is and what you do on it.
Wow, this is awkward. I do basically what we're doing, but I'm on my own. So basically, if you like to hear me ramble about combat sports, and I cover all of them, I know you guys do dip into big fights from kickboxing and boxing, obviously, as we're doing today, primarily MMA focused. I am also primarily MMA focused, but obviously do cover boxing in more depth, and I cover Japanese kickboxing as well, and Muay Thai. The podcast is called Combat Chronicles. It can be found at Spotify, Apple, all other good podcast platforms, whatever you care to use. And as you guys are, I'm also on Patreon as well, www.patreon.com/Combat Chronicles. And for a few bob a month, just like your own service you got set up there, Connor, guys can get access to exclusive podcasts. Me scoring old MMA fights, talking about classic fights of boxing, and in October, the big one, the Guide to Pride, which I've been teasing for everyone for years now, which every episode will look at a single Pride event, and obviously starting with the big one, Pride 1. So I think if anyone wants to get in now, that one's coming in October. And for anyone listening to this, and sorry for taking up your time, but this is my fee. This is my fee for letting for me bringing my particular blend of apparently Russell Brand-esque dialogue to the podcast. If you read the comments,
I am myself a patron. It's a good show. In case people can't tell, Kyle really knows his shit. Not only a very solid technical analyst, but possibly the most knowledgeable person I've ever met in regarding like combat sports history. So Combat Chronicles is a very apt title. You guys should.
It's a storytelling podcast, Connor. Yeah. You are correct in that regard. Yeah. I do like to obviously talk about technical details of a fight, but mainly to tie it in how I actually told the story of the fight. If you're coming to listen for me for like a Jack Slack style thing, not really my kind of bag. I do talk about little details here and there, as I'm sure you could glean from this, but mainly I like to tell the stories.
You focus on the stuff that even I myself find like actually interesting. Why do people listen to this show? I don't know.
Oh, mate, honestly, I know you two anyway, but I listen to it every week.
Well,
you're like a old married couple.
He's a sweetheart.
Fantastic.
He's truly a sweetheart, folks. He puts up this tough
front. It's great.
Well, thank you. All right, let's take a break then. When we come back, after now 41 and a half minutes, who cares? It's going to be long, folks. It's going to be long. Next up, Usyk versus Johsua after this.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, folks, welcome back to Heavy Hands. As promised, on to last weekend's scintillating. One of my favorite words. When I don't know what to say, I say scintillating. Fights, a rematch between Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua. You guys understand. You guys notice that we pronounce the TH in that word, right? We Americans.
Anthony.
That's how it's pronounced. For
people say Anthony Joshua over here as well.
Do they?
It's kind of interchangeable, I find.
What a relief. Wow. So, Anthony Joshua. I'm safe to call him Anthony. And Alexander Usyk. Phil and I very, very briefly touched on this last week, and we essentially said, like, hey, AJ didn't actually do that bad in the first fight, but it was just the kind of thing where he can't actually keep up with Usyk for 12 rounds, and that's why he lost. He'll probably make some interesting adjustments and probably lose a similar fight because you just get the sense he can't keep up with Usyk for 12 rounds. And that's what happened. But it was awesome. The adjustments were very smart. I don't think it's a shock that AJ kind of fell in and out of those adjustments because he was doing quite a lot of stuff that has not really been typical throughout his career. But it led to a fight with, I think, much higher points than their first fight of competitiveness and drama. The last 5 rounds of this fight were thrilling. They were really, really fun to see AJ come on super strong and then Usyk come back even stronger. And just every attempt AJ made after a certain point to get himself back into the fight was just brutally punished by the brilliant Alexander Usyk. So, Kyle, I know you're possibly the biggest Usyk fan on the planet. I'm going to let you. I'm going to let you tell me about this fight. What did you? First of all, what did you make of AJ's adjustments, and then we'll get into how Usyk brilliantly readjusted to those adjustments.
Yeah. So I did actually do a podcast beforehand where I sort of broke down what I thought AJ needed to do, and to tell the story of this fight, you need to sort of have some sort of to know the story of the first fight. And in that one, I actually thought Anthony Joshua put in the best performance of his career.
Yeah.
A lot of people didn't think that. I think he made some really interesting in-fight adjustments, which you rarely see from him in that one. His in-fight adjustments usually sort of are just getting a second wind and doing what he does.
Right.
And in the first one, he managed to adjust to Usyk taking away his jab. He was basically, his jab was taken away from him, but he was offensively impotent, and he had to start working and bringing in his right hand as a counter punch over Usyk's backhand, or trying to get him as he went to exit out the back door. Really nice work from Joshua, and showed a couple of things in that fight that I thought might work in this one. For example, dirty fighting, holding behind the head and hitting in the body. Usyk don't like that kind of stuff. Who likes getting it in the body? We'll talk about that later, because that's one of the narratives that have sprung up from this fight that have completely blown my mind, which is, he don't like getting it to the body. No one likes getting it to the body.
Shit.
But what Joshua did that was really good was, and my theory on Usyk is much like Manny Pacquiao, in order to beat him or at least hit him consistently, you need to be willing to punch with him as he's punching.
Yeah.
And be an aggressive counter puncher. And Joshua did that well. The sequence in the fight, he was more proactive with the jab. He wasn't able to land it consistently, but what I didn't like in the first fight was he was flicking the jab out there, not as a throwaway, but just imitating what a jab should look like. He was not able to hit the head, and he was just putting his arm out, and he was cannon fodder, essentially.
Purely range finding, no actual intent to land or surprise or pester Usyk. It was just like, where is he, where is he, where is he? And it was a very timeable rhythm, which he did, again, sort of fall back into at points in this fight, but he also had
There was no process in that first. He was trying to touch Usyk, trying to herd him with the trying to push him backwards towards the ropes. But what I really liked was the body shots which Joshua was able to get. He would, as Usyk was trying to reset coming off the ropes, he'd throw a combo, nice work. And the big one, which hurt him, he actually slipped inside Usyk's jab and hit him with kind of like a shovel hook to the body. Yeah. Again, really, really nice work. And just more proactive, more positive, and just able to put shots together more in combination, because he was more willing to let his hands go. What I want to stress to everyone is, a lot of people said, why aren't he throwing punches? And the fact of the matter is, with Joshua, he needs to establish his jab in order to feel comfortable to let his hands go. How I describe Anthony Joshua is, he's a power boxer. And there's a distinction between power boxer and boxer puncher. A boxer puncher, for me, is someone who utilises all the textbook skills of boxing in order to get the best leverage possible to get off their power punches. I'm thinking Joe Louis, Edson Charles, Michael Spinks, someone like that. Yeah. A power boxer like Anthony Joshua is someone who looks like an upright, mid-range boxer puncher, but he necessitizes the use for a jab because he lacks the skill set to actually get his punches off. He is not able to draw a lead like a great boxer puncher would. He is not able to consistently counter-punch an opponent, herd them, move them around the ring, that sort of stuff. So he is essentially a power boxer. He is a mid-range, great finisher, lovely hook off the jab when he can get it moving, nice right hand, a nice array of punches, but you can diffuse him and he's not able to adjust. Yeah. In this one, he came in with a good game plan. He adjusted big time from the first fight. He was able to put Usyk under more pressure, came up short. We're going to have a discussion about the scorecards, because your scorecard, Connor, was closer to mine on the night. But when I rewatched it in the morning, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, guys, about that big 9th round where Joshua was battering Usyk around the ring. When I rewatched it, Usyk was not in as much peril as he seemed to be on first watch. Yeah. And actually, it might be controversial amongst your listenership, but impressed as I was with Anthony Joshua, this is his new best performance of his career, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Considering who he was fighting, how he did it, and what he did in the ring. I actually only gave him 2 rounds, round 2 and round 9. So competitive, but in my opinion, not very close.
Which would you have as swing rounds? Any?
3 is a competitor, because if I remember correctly, not much happened. 8,
Yep.
8. I thought on the night, Joshua's definitely won rounds 8 and 9. But looking back at it, there was a nice flurry in round 8, which was a sign of things to come. And I think Joshua then felt buoyed by that and thought, oh yeah, I can hit this guy to the body. But generally, I felt Usyk was peppering him enough to take the round. But that was a potential swing round. So I think you could have
probably
1-1-6,
though.
1-1-6.
I think the ones I gave him, that because your scorecard's 10-2, mine's 8-4.
Yeah.
I think the rounds I gave him are probably your swing rounds. Like 3 was definitely one that I gave Joshua, which was just not very much happened, but Joshua was more aggressive.
Landed a couple good, yeah.
Yeah, and Usyk had really yet to get going. And then I feel like, maybe it was 8, maybe it was 7. There was a round where Usyk just kind of took a little time off and once again just allowed it to get close. And Joshua, again, I mean, a huge credit to him that he was just so much more consistent. And really, like, I like your distinction between, like, what is a power boxer, what's a boxer puncher. This was a boxer puncher kind of performance. I think, coached himself into being a boxer puncher to fight Usyk, where he was going to have to press forward, get into the pocket, and draw shots out of Usyk and counter them. And Usyk had to figure out how to, what those counters were and how to re-counter them. I really think in about round 3, Usyk had yet to really get going, but you could kind of see him make the decision in that round. Okay, I'm going to have to stand in, not just move away, not just sidestep. There's going to come points where I'm going to have to see these counters coming and punch with this dude. I think
just quickly say though, Connor, you introduced me as a big Usyk fan. I just want to stress to your listenership that there's no bias at all in my assessment of the fight or the scorecards. I know it seems really wide, but I was really impressed by Anthony Joshua on the night and afterwards.
No, I think in
terms of scoring, it wasn't too close.
There are many fights where the scorecards do not reflect how competitive the fight was. This would not. Joshua did amazing work throughout this fight. I agree, like fully better than we've ever seen from him. But Usyk is just such like a consummate professional boxer that like it's really difficult to take rounds away from him, and usually the round you definitively take away from him is immediately followed by a round that he brutally takes back from you, which we definitely saw in this fight. So Phil, what did you make of the performance here from both guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunately for Usyk, it is one of the ones where you have to. You sort of end up giving a lot of praise to Joshua, because I think he, much like the first fight, he still had the, it was can he climb the hill?
Right.
Whereas for Usyk, it was just can he simply be better again?
Yeah.
And in both cases, the question was kind of answered in the same way. But yeah, I mean, I fully agree. Like, it was another like great performance from Joshua, and he kind of embarrassed himself a bit after the fight.
Oh yeah,
but
fucking hell,
kind of.
You can, but you can see why you'd be so upset after.
Yeah,
you'd put in the amount of work that he clearly has. I mean, admittedly, there's obviously some serious there was some serious. Brand management, I think, going on there, and that he was just like, I need to preserve, the image of Anthony Joshua here and get back in there. And
one of the strangest tantrums I've ever seen, and
so weird.
I do think there's something to be said about the fact that Joshua is such a superstar.
Yeah,
that none of the people around him were like, oh, he's embarrassing himself. Like, just kind of let him do that, even
there
though
was no one who was just like, no, stop it.
Fucking 17 and a half stone matey who could knock out everyone in that ring apart from the matey that gave him a beating over 2 fights. So,
but ultimately, I feel like it will kind of historically be like a good moment for Usyk, because you could see Usyk was every bit as angry as Joshua for having his moment taken away from him. But do
you think that Joshua's kind of having a paddy because he's, for the last 11 months, the narrative has been is that if he just changes things up, he'll have this guy.
Yeah.
And to do everything that he did and to fight as he did, and in the ring feel that you're being more successful.
Yeah.
So I have to accept that you're a level below a guy when you've been built up to be the next big thing. And I think from the rumours I'm hearing Joshua's basically told, if you get this guy out of there, you're going to be fighting Fury in Saudi in December.
Yeah.
That's the rumor that's going around. He must be gutted.
He has much said so directly to Usyk, like in part of his weird, like, complimentary tantrum where he was clearly furious, and I can understand that. I'm not going to hold it against him too much. Like, I haven't, like, stopped liking Chris Curtis after his embarrassing display against Jack Hermanson. Like, you put everything into this.
Yep.
Again, I get head cases, you know, like, there's a huge pressure and stress, and you really want to do well, and sometimes you just act like an ass because you're way too focused on winning. But he has much said so to Usyk that he was like, how did you beat me? You know, you're not strong. You're not bigger than me. It's skill. Like
he's fucking stronger than him, though. He is stronger than him, Usyk.
I think, well, yeah, sure, yeah. Even in their tie-ups, like Usyk had such great technique, he just feels stronger. But I think, yeah, very much this was Joshua having to definitively come to the conclusion, this is a guy who is just better than me. I did everything I could. I fought a great fight. I just cannot beat this guy. I would have to get tremendously, I would need a genuine fluke to beat this guy. Mm-hmm. And that it's true. So, yeah, I think that's why we saw that reaction. Like,
basically better than everyone, though, right?
Yeah, it should be no shame. But this
boxing, is he not one of the best fighters you've seen in the modern era?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's you know, it's hard for a guy in Joshua's position to come to terms with that. I think that's what we saw. But credit to Usyk for remaining so calm and so cool despite being visibly even angrier than Joshua was for having lost in his like last moment to prove himself a really great boxer. Usyk comported himself very well. He was very patient. He let Joshua took his belts away from him and dropped him outside the ring.
Yeah.
And Usyk just watched, and he snatched his flag back, and Joshua was like trying to compliment Usyk, but then he was like, "No, fuck you, I'm talking." And Usyk's like, "Just give me the flag." He went,
"Sorry, mate. Oh shit, it's you that wants the flag back." Yeah, okay, yeah. This doesn't hurt me anymore.
Right. Somebody
and also that really bizarre thing where he said the quote of the year, which is, "What's happening in Ukraine's really bad. Well, I don't know what's happening out there, but it's not nice." Understatement of the century.
It's not nice.
It's not nice.
Yeah, but I thought that Usyk, somebody on Twitter, I wish I could remember even more than usual, and I never do, but somebody said Usyk was the last sober person at the party dealing with all of his obnoxious drunk friends.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. That was exactly
that's so good.
His attitude was like, this guy's drunk, it's not worth it, just let him get it out of his system, and then I'll have my moment. I thought it reflected quite well on Usyk, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, it was, the things which, the key things which, core to Anthony Joshua's style and core to why Usyk is so good were the things which ended up getting him overwhelmed again. Because you could see that Joshua really wanted to. He'd found a way to open to open exchanges by actually jabbing rather than feinting.
Yep.
But he was also trying to finish every exchange. He was trying to be the last person to, the last one to punch in the exchange. But it's just the fact that he cannot keep his feet moving during exchanges like Usyk can.
Yeah.
And he cannot defend shots like Usyk can. So he kept, So you could see him, trying different things throughout the fight, whether it was just kind of brawling with Usyk or just like at certain points just trying to use lots of like head movement whilst staying planted. But it was just the fact that Usyk could maneuver around him whilst keeping his own head movement and defense going, and that he just became more and more likely to be able to finish the exchange on his terms again. And also just the fact that, like, I think the sheer uncomfortableness, the sheer lack of comfort in Joshua trying to force himself into that style, I think just kind of gassed him out over time. Yeah. Like Usyk is just a natural. He's just a natural fighter. He doesn't get tired doing this stuff. He doesn't get mentally drained from having to think about things. I mean, he was so much less emotionally volatile than Joshua was during the fight. There were these points. To go to your point earlier about how upset Joshua was because he tried everything. You could see there were points where like Joshua was like, yeah, I've got him.
Yeah.
Like he was going back to his corner and he was thrilled with himself.
Yeah.
But Usyk was just icy cold the whole time.
Joshua was very composed up till about the 5th round. Every time he went back to his corner, he was just following a plan, and his team had drilled it into his head. Like, all we need is that you keep pressuring, you keep working the body, things are going to pan out. And through 4 rounds, he had done that pretty successfully. And the fight was very much in control. And then Usyk had got all the information he needed and started to fight. And then any moment of success Joshua had after that, he was getting excited because he realized he was pulling it back when he did something well rather than just following the strategy.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's talk about let's talk about, well, I'll let Kyle talk about Usyk, because again, I mean, you're not a huge Usyk fan for no reason. Like he is an absolutely brilliant fighter. He's clearly pound for pound one of the best fighters of the modern era. But let's just briefly touch on what the actual adjustments were that Joshua made. He used his jab a lot more proactively. I really liked that he wasn't just measuring with it. He was throwing it away tactically. He was throwing it out there to sting. And Usyk was mostly able to get out of the way, but Joshua was using the fact that he was having to get out of the way to his advantage really, really well. He was. This is something I harp on and on about jabs. Listeners of the show will know that I never stop talking about jabs. But the jab is an information gathering tool, and it is a tempo gaining tool. It's an initiative. And so it really, ideally, it should not matter at all whether the jab lands or does not land. Because if it doesn't land, it is still telling you things. It's telling you, I need to get closer to land. Or it's telling you, oh, he moves his head there when I throw the jab. And that's the information that you use to build off of. The jab is a building block. And to that extent, it doesn't matter how successful it is by itself. It succeeds in setting other things up. And I thought Joshua did a fantastic job of that. Like, using his jab, that right hook that he was timing off of Usyk's head movement early, really, really good. Nice sweeping punch, but also, as you said, Phil, trying to finish the exchanges. Another thing listeners of the show will know that I love to death, counters to the body. Finishing exchanges to the body. Having those be the last shots you throw. Really good idea against a guy with Usyk's footwork and head movement, to just think, I'm not going to be able to take a guess and hit him clean every time after I've forced a defensive move out of him with the jab, so I should go for the largest target possible. And a lot of nice, honestly, really nice counters from Joshua. When he would jab, Usyk would try to counter, Joshua would slip, and then he would come back with 1 or sometimes 2 or even 3 body shots in a row. Those were really, really nice adjustments. The body shots were essentially like an adjustment in the first fight. Mid-fight. He found that right uppercut to the body, I think, like halfway through. In this fight, they were planned from the get-go. And he did a much better job of proactively creating opportunities where he could gamble on a body shot. And use that to kind of circumvent the fact that Usyk has way better defense. To just, again, take the easy targets. When he's in range, swing at his body. You're a big hitter. You're a big guy. That's where you're most likely to land. I think that's a very good strategic decision to just sort of embed that in the game plan from word one.
It's the whole thing. Don't punch where he is, punch where he's going to be. And
exactly. It's way easier to do that when you go to the body.
Yeah, he did that well in the first fight, as he was able to sort of catch Usyk on the exit. The body punch adjustment you mentioned in the first fight was, again, the right hand to the body, which I really liked, but Usyk took that away from Joshua. Joshua wasn't really able to pace himself. I think he was already despondent at that point. But, I think using the jab as well, I wasn't able to really use that ramrod jab often in this fight. But I like the fact he just wasn't aiming aimlessly to the head. When I say aimlessly, obviously he's aiming for the head, but he was just flicking out there. Wasn't using it as a throwaway. In this, he used it for the level change 1-2. That's like one of the early punches, which were really good for him, the right straight to the body. And then obviously built up into eventually using it upcuts to the body and whatnot, and working Usyk out. that 9th round was the big one for Joshua. If you watch it back, at the time I thought, fuck me, he's going to stop him here. If you look back, Usyk, actually there was this whole sequence of that where he slips about 6 or 7 punches in a row. And he knows what's going on. He knows exactly what's going on. He was under duress. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not an idiot. But he knew what was going on. And, when you watch big guys slug it out, sometimes there are moments where they get roughed up. And it's not like it's nothing like, say, was it the 4th round of Wilder Fury 3? When he was sat on his ass and looked completely out of it. There's nothing like that. He was hurt. He was knocked about. If we compare Usyk to his contemporaries, who have also been put in similar situations by Joshua, most of them have been badly hurt, rocked, dropped, etc. And nearly all of them have been considerably bigger than Usyk as well. So I'm not massively concerned about that, although I was really happy for Joshua that he had that moment. You ready to hand it over to me to talk about Usyk?
Tell me about Usyk. Why did none of all these brilliant things that Joshua did work?
Well, it's simple and also complex. The simple thing is that Usyk is just a level above him, and in the same sense that you sent your best men for years to try and desperately beat Mayweather, and they were lucky to win 2 rounds off of him. Yeah, there's a similar thing happening now. This idea that you're going to be able to do a demolition job on this guy is false, and I don't know why people haven't yet got it into their heads that this is the fighter of the generation. Whether or not Fury can beat him or not, another guy who's right up for that in terms of the heavyweights. On a pound-for-pound sense, Alexander Usyk is the fighter of the generation. He's the fighter they all told you Lomachenko was. Lomachenko is fantastic and a brilliant fighter. Usyk is, in my opinion, a more diverse and capable operator at all phases, and he is essentially the pound-for-pound number 1 right now. And in terms of his defensive natural reflexes, his ability to pinpoint where a fighter's going to go next, he is Pernell Whitaker-esque in my opinion. If you scale that up to a 15 and a half stone guy or 16 stone, whatever he is, 220 pound guy, that's essentially what you would get. You're not going to get a guy that nips around the ring real fast and is like Mayweather-esque in terms of his sharpness and speed, but in terms of the big guys, Usyk is very much that kind of fighter. He is. I saw a thing the other day where someone said people need to stop making out that Usyk's some kind of Ali, and it's like, why? Why are people so adverse to the idea that we might see an all-time great fighter in his own time? It's rare it happens, but it does happen. And every era there are fighters that we don't need to catch up to. And we are seeing a fighter.
I remember, you can read the contemporary articles about Muhammad Ali from his day, and they're like, this guy gets compared to Sugar Ray Robinson, and how dare they? And you're like, come on, man. Like, people have these historical references, and historical figures come from somewhere.
Right, yeah.
But also, Usyk as well, like, he is the size of a legendary heavyweight. He is... people think, he's small. He's small compared to the big guys of today, but generally the big guys of today have never been the dominant forces. We've only really had a couple, and they have come in the last couple of eras, and I think that's why people get the idea that bigger is necessarily better, but that hasn't always been the case. Usyk is 6'3", 78-inch reach, exactly the same as Ali. He is about 220 pounds clothed. He is about the same weight essentially as a little bit lighter than George Foreman in his prime, and about a stone heavier than Joe Frazier, and considerably heavier than the likes of Marciano and Dempsey, which I think people think Usyk is. I think they think he's like a giant killer. He's a perfectly fine heavyweight in terms of size,
he just
scale,
reads
and everything.
Reads as a giant killer.
There's no concern. From a skill level, yes. The way he occupies your guard and everything, you've got to be able to punch with him. That 10th round, which I think we're going to have to talk about now, really. Yeah. As we just spoke about the 9th round, that was breathtaking. But Joshua had his best punch of the whole fight in that round, which was the right hand down the pipe, aggressively countering him. If you think of how Juan Manuel Marquez dealt with Manny Pacquiao, the ability to stay composed under fire amongst those flurries, to be able to move your feet quickly with him and able to aggressively counter, that's the only way you're going to beat this guy. And I'm not sure if there's anyone at heavyweight outside of Tyson Fury. Well, Tyson Fury, let's be honest, he's the only guy who could potentially do this job. There's no one else out there who could potentially beat this guy at all. There's no one. Because what Usyk does is he occupies your guard and he'll step around to the outside. He hit Joshua with the 1-2-3. So he's 1-2, outside angle, the 3 comes round the guard. Joshua's looking the other way to Usyk. So by the time he can even react, he's been hit from the blind side, and then he's got to turn round. And as he turns round, Usyk's turning him again. So he constantly causes you to reset. I called Johsua a power boxer earlier, essentially, but even boxer punchers, they typically need to set their feet. You do get the guys like Lewis and Arguello also always in position to punch, and lateral movement can give them a difficult time in establishing their reads. Usyk's constantly doing that.
Yeah.
So therefore, he's able to limit Johsua to a handful of rounds, a couple of swing rounds, a couple of decent exchanges. He can take the edge off power punches. He can diffuse stronger guys with his clinch work, which you mentioned earlier. Is he able to get bicep control? He's actually throwing Johsua off of him to create space to punch him more. But that 10th round, he's just come out of a round where we all thought, I assume you guys did the same as me, he's nearly got him, Johsua. He's nearly got him. And Usyk just came out and just beat the fucking shit out of him.
Yeah.
And it was just awe-inspiring.
And took perhaps the worst. Took perhaps his worst shot of the fight in that comeback round, and then came back even harder.
Didn't give a fuck.
Right after. And that's the thing with I do get some of the trepidation. Like, Usyk's style is not as pretty as Lomachenko's, and of course
of course not.
He's going to.
Yeah, as Carl said, it physically can't be.
It can't be.
No,
and he's going to be compared with Lomachenko because they're both Ukrainians. They both share a camp. Like, they've trained so much together. But Usyk, in addition to just being about as good at this type of style as you can be at this weight class, that there being some sort of like allowance for just being a big dude, you can't be as graceful as Lomachenko. He is also just more of a fighter. Like, to your point, Kyle, about Usyk being more of an all-time great, like, Usyk would not have lost to who was it, Salido?
Lopez, Teofimo Lopez. Lomachenko took rounds to gather his reads.
Exactly.
Usyk doesn't do that. He is proactive. This is what does my head in.
He's
sorry to interrupt you, Connor, but it ties into the whole Johsua just had to chase him round for 12 rounds. Usyk doesn't run around.
Yeah.
He stands in front of you. He pressures you on the front foot constantly.
Yeah.
He turns you.
But
yes.
He's in range, and he's looking to fight you. And if you hit Usyk, he will fight back. He's a fucking Wolverine. Like, he is savage. And his response to getting in trouble is going to be, he's, you know what I mean? Like, he's just going to stand in there. There are points in this fight where it wasn't even beautiful angles and beautiful defense, where he was like, I'm going to throw 5 punches really, really quickly right in your face. I'm just going to let all these shots go because you cannot roll me over. It isn't going to happen.
There's no tail in the backhand either, is there? He just turns that left hand over sometimes. He doesn't need to feint it. He could just throw that backhand. But it's that unbelievable.
Beautiful combination of technique with just like genuine fighting spirit. Like, Usyk loves to fight. He's incredibly comfortable under pressure. There's a point where he loves to, have time and make reads and get to build. But if he's not given that luxury, he will beat your ass. You know what I mean? Like, he had his opportunities for like a Salido kind of fight. He fought Briedis. He fought Gassiev. Like,
yeah.
He's fought these ferocious, messy, violent fighters, and he will, when it's necessary. And Johsua was as close as he can be to that kind of fighter in this fight. When necessary, he will stand and bang. He will just back you off with violence. And it's just these moments punctuating what are otherwise like completely professional, classy, technical performances that really make him special. There's a lot of classy technicians out there. I love like Tevin Farmer as a fighter I really like to watch. But Tevin Farmer can get shut out of a fight looking for the perfect shot and focusing too much on his defense. Sometimes you got to gamble. You got to go for it. And that is what Usyk has that I think sets him apart from a lot of other great defensive technical fighters. He's ferocious.
He's an all-terrain fighter who happens to be a defensive savant.
Exactly, yeah.
I mentioned earlier as well, actually, that, no fighter could be perfect. There's no such thing. Sugar Ray Robinson, we mentioned him. Phil mentioned him a minute ago. Just absolutely supernatural fighter, but relied on his chin too much and was not, particularly concerned with defence. Even though he's more than capable of doing so. Yeah. That shows a level of arrogance in a fighter. Do you know what I mean? Incredible chin, it's absolutely fine, but I'm just saying, you could pinpoint, you could pick at anyone. With Usyk, he's not the biggest natural puncher, he is a spiteful puncher, but he's not a big puncher by any means.
He's sharp.
He will get you. Yeah, he's relatively sharp. But he will sacrifice that in order to pepper you and to remain loose and not sit down his punches too often. Like you said, Connor, if he has to, he will. In that 10th round, he just drowned Joshua, and he hit him with his best shot, and he came back. And the guy I came to mind was the guy we'd never seen any footage of, which was Harry Greb. There we said, it was like being drowned in showers of boxing gloves or whatever it was that Dempsey said about their sparring. Mickey Walker, one of the 10 greatest fighters of all time, in my opinion, said that Harry Greb hit him so hard he was walking like a man in a dream, that he'd got to punch him and suddenly Harry Greb would be stood behind him, and he just didn't know how any fighter could do this. And Usyk reminds me of that. Greb was not a big puncher either. I'm not saying they're anything similar stylistically, but in terms of the traits they possess and the way they bamboozle fighters, they really were, and are in Usyk's case, wizards of the ring. And I just want to get across to your listeners that if you're not boxing fans, if you are just MMA fans, if you think the idea of a defensive, non-punching heavyweight doesn't sound that appealing, Usyk is one of the most fun and enjoyable stylists you'll ever see. And if you get a chance now, he's not going to be around for much longer. Maybe just one more fight.
Could be. Jump
on and watch, because he is, it's very rare you get to see a fighter who's a legend in their own time, and this guy really is. And I say that as a fan, but as an objective analyst as well. You know me, Connor, I've seen a lot of boxing matches. I couldn't pick many people to beat this guy from history. He really is special.
Yeah, drown you with volume, and then when he's picking his shots, they're so sharp, they're so compactly thrown, so well timed. Can I just say that the up jabs were great. The left hand, when it started to work, fantastic. All the different ways of setting it up and throwing it as a counter, and also like a move that Lomachenko himself does all the time, this sort of like soft left hand, slipping the jab from Joshua and just sort of poking him as he's pushing into his jab. But Usyk's right hand blew me away in this fight. The right hook counter, and sometimes it was sometimes it was itself
like a little stubby little punch.
Yeah.
He just sort of turned the hand over as Joshua was coming to rage and pivoted out and just twatted him on the way out. And I was like, whoa, what was that? Yeah. Really sweet.
Sometimes it was more of a jab. It was like a right cross coming from the southpaw stance where it the range was such that he had to adjust and throw it straight, but it came off the same setups. Slipping outside Joshua's jab and coming back across with the right hand, that was the shot that shocked the hell out of Joshua every time it landed. The first really clean punch Usyk landed, I think in round 3, Joshua's surging forward, and Usyk just casual little slip, boom, just fully Joshua's own force running into the shot. Sweat flies. It is such a clean, perfectly timed punch. And I'm always harping on about how the lead hand is the real sneaky weapon in these orthodox southpaw matchups. And Usyk is a fantastic example of that. He has such a deceptive right hand. It's such a great counterpunch that you just, by the nature of the matchup, the orthodox fighters just cannot see it coming. And Joshua in particular being a little more cumbersome, despite all the adjustments. Like, you could see when Joshua was pressing into exchange, the body shots were a great idea, because they, it's an easier target. You're hoping to wear Usyk down. You're getting your shots in where you can.
Legs away from him, exactly. Yeah.
But also, you could see that he needed that kind of target where he was less likely to miss, because when he did miss a right hand to the body, horribly out of position, just bumbles forward. I think at the end
fell over his front leg.
Absolutely, and falling completely out of his stance, ending up half with his back to Usyk when he missed and Usyk made enough space. And just taking advantage of these moments with such skill and accuracy. Usyk is undeniably a brilliant, once-in-a-generation kind of fighter.
He's so good that after 36 minutes in the ring with him, you end up having a nervous breakdown and a meltdown in the ring in front of millions of people.
Yeah.
How fucking good he is.
Yeah, you do the kind of thing where you think you're saving yourself from embarrassment, but you're just making it worse.
Yeah, you're just digging the hole deeper.
Yeah, classic. We've all been there. Just not in front of millions of people. Okay, well, Kyle, thank you so much. This is going to be just such a tremendously long episode because Phil and I still have to talk about Aldo Dwalishvili and Rockhold Acosta after this, and then God knows we're going to have to. Well, is there anything else to touch on for a Patreon episode? Maybe not. But
Oh, come on. Battle of the big fat lads.
Oh, yeah, that was
Come
kind
on
of
now.
cool, I guess. That was all right.
That was fun.
But we really appreciate you having you here. Always a treat to talk about boxing. And I'm setting it up now. Next time there's a big Cheeto Vera fight, I got to have you on. I have to... See, I'm
because
always...
you're scared of me owning you with my logic and reason again.
That's it, yeah. And I also...
Honestly, Phil, I thought you were trolling him. I thought it was like a bit. I honestly did not think that you were being serious last week. I'm shocked
He's
that a man of your stature could be full of so much hatred.
He's playing it up, but he is genuinely frustrated with Cheeto, and that's what's feeding the bit. And typically with the two of you on, I feel like a sort of Paul Revere. Like my only responsibility is to stand my ground. I have to warn the rest of my brave fellow Americans against the redcoat menace. And so what I need to do now is sow a seed of discord between the two of you, where Kyle has to defend Cheeto against Phil's insane ranting and ravings against him. So when Cheeto Vera fights, when Cheeto Vera fights next, let's have you back on, Kyle, because it's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, guys. And one thing I will say, it's going to be quite a long episode, but there wasn't too much on that UFC 247 card anyway. But isn't it great? Aren't combat sports great? That us three have managed to chat so much shit about these two fights that have got so much interesting talking points. For fascinating fighters, two fascinating fights, and that is alone surely made this episode fantastic for the listeners. So I hope everyone enjoyed having me on. I know I've got my haters out there. To you guys, I say I'm sorry that your life is so shit.
It was. I mean, it was a historic weekend. There's nothing more you can really say.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, thanks
so
again,
I'm going to
Kyle.
go now.
People, check out his podcast once again, Combat Chronicles. You can find it on Patreon. It is well worth. I think it's $3, right? Just like ours.
I don't know how much it is in dollars. It's £4 British. I just want to say the reason I'm not staying on for the rest of the UFC is not because I didn't watch the card, not because I've got no interest, not because I only watch the main events.
Because it's on your
I'd
show.
love to talk about your favourite fighter, Sean Woodson, with your Rebush, because that was a fucking shit show.
I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to
talk about that. That was just bedlam. I've already spoken about it over on my Patreon, which I've already said. www.patreon.com/Combat Chronicles. If you want to hear me talk about the rest of this UFC card, I have covered everything which I found interesting on there. UFC 278 Patreon podcast, just like this. You get an RSS feed and that if you sign up. So if you're at all interested, I know times are tough for everyone at the moment. There's a lot going on in the world, but if you're at all interested, it's there if you want to hear more from me. So thanks for listening, guys, and thanks to you two for having me as always. Love you both.
Four British pounds sterling, so post Brexit that is about $1.50. So a real steal for you still living in just a booming economy. Thank you, Kyle. Once again, always
thank you, guys.
A genuine pleasure, and we look forward to having you back again.
Take care, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.
You too, man.
Take care.
All right, Phil and
Take care, Phil.
Phil and I will be back after this with 2 more fights from UFC 278. God knows how we're going to keep this from being an hour and 40-minute episode at minimum, but it is well worth it when we've got such a wonderful guest. Phil and I back after this. Thanks again to Kyle. Time for a break.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back, folks, to Heavy Hands. We have 2 more fights here from UFC 278. Will be the last thing we talk about probably ever again. I mean, I feel like some of those subtle barbs about your Cheeto Vera opinions in the Kyle parts of the show really, you composed yourself, but I could tell they got to you.
I think it's just going to be the rift which eventually drives us apart.
Yeah, it's starting already.
Yep.
It's starting already. That's a 30 Rock reference that no one has any reason to get. By the way, that Kyle McLachlan, what a guy. What a character.
Always great having him on.
I just love that guy to death. I keep saying I love things to death. That's my new phrase for this episode. All right. What 2 fights do we have to talk about? We have the stupidest fight of all time, Luke Rockhold versus Paul Acosta at altitude, or elevation, if you're a pedant, which I am. And then we also have Jose Aldo, Merab Dvalishvili. I was weirdly gratified by the latter, which only because after, having all this trepidation, which is just common for Aldo fights, I had a guy I really like on Twitter, Smoogie. You know Smoogie.
Yep.
Funny guy, really, really, really good sort of just biting commentary on shit. But he had a tweet, which I think is a recurring thing for him. He was like, now it's Jose Aldo fight week. It means it's time for everyone to act like Jose Aldo isn't just like the perfect mechanism of violence. And what if this is the guy who beats him now that he's post prime? And of course it's not going to happen. He's Jose Aldo, and I'm the real Jose Aldo fan. All the rest of you forgot. Yep. Well, guess what? We were right. We thought Merab might be weirdly tough for Jose, and yeah, he was. I mean, and also you and I were, I think, on point with the you in particular with the comparisons to Aldo Volkanovski. There were elements of it that, as we pointed out, were not nearly as effective for Merab as they were for Volkanovski, but they were part of an overall effective fight that where it was really Jose Aldo's inability to pull the trigger and actually take control of the fight that lost it for him. First of all, Phil, let me say, are you as shocked as me? Because we had a discussion recently about, cage control and wrestling, and obviously if you're doing that successfully and nothing's happening in return, you kind of have to be winning. Are you as shocked at me as the number of people who thought Jose Aldo won this fight?
No.
He didn't.
No.
But he didn't win, right?
No, of course he
There's
didn't.
absolutely
But
no way.
You know the kind of people we follow on Twitter.
Oh, of course. They're insufferable. They're like us in that
but more so.
But more so. Or at least
no, of course. You knew what would happen as soon as you were watching this. You didn't need to check Twitter to know
didn't
that
actually.
People would simultaneously be saying, giving every round to Jose Aldo and for clean offense, whilst also saying that he is more shot than Hanan Barao when he left the UFC.
But he's just so much better. I didn't. Maybe I'm just naive, I guess. I was
you are.
Yeah, I know that. I was actually, no need to confirm, you fucking piece of shit. But I was actually surprised. I was watching this, obviously Jose is losing this fight. It's so clear. And maybe that's just me. At this point in my diehard Aldo fandom, all of this is everything since losing to McGregor is cream, Mm-hmm. This is just
it's not cream, but all the victories since then.
Exactly. It's all just bonus. Yeah. It's all you're on borrowed time. Anything you do at this point is going to be 10 times more impressive because you shouldn't be doing it. And by this exact same logic, the other side of that coin is that when you lose, I'm like, yeah, of course, because you're past it. You're not the Jose Aldo that I fell in love with. So to me, I watch a fight like this and I'm like, oh, I hoped it wasn't possible. I saw how he might do it, but it's one of these. It's one of these post-prime Aldo performances where he's just clearly losing. And I've so made my peace, I think, with this phase of Aldo's career. I'm so willing to accept that he's losing that I was genuinely surprised that anyone could look at this and think, maybe Jose won, because he didn't. There's no reasonable way. I don't care how important damage is. For 2 rounds, he didn't fucking do anything. He lost. You can't not do anything and win a fight. Merab was ineffective. He just clinched him and kneed him in the thigh. And yeah. And Jose didn't do anything. So he lost. Also, like Volkanovski, Merab's striking was way more effective by round 3.
This is one of the things is that you end up, if you want to have a case for an Aldo win, you end up having to walk this really weird thin line where you have to look at the fight as from a purely scoring metric, right? Because if you were looking at this fight, as a simulation of what happens in an actual fight, there's no doubt who won this fight, and there's no doubt who would have won if it had kept going.
Right.
Like, but then you also, you have to like abandon this idea of a real fight.
Yeah.
But then you also have to like have a conception of scoring which is very rigidly focused on like landing singular clean offense. And even then, like, did Aldo really land that much more clean offense? Like, there was like a clinch break. Like, Merab landed one hard strike off a clinch break in round 1, which was one of the only meaningful shots in that round. I gave Aldo round 1.
Me too.
But then, Merab still landed a bunch of stuff in round 2, even just like, breaking clinches and
he controlled Aldo for like 80% of the round, and then round 3 was much the same, except that, again, like Volkanovski, the feints, the exhaustion, and the ever-present threat of these incredibly, clearly frustrating, intractable takedown battles, he was also just getting in shots. Like, he landed quite a lot on Aldo in round 3, and I hear so many people talking about, like, how people gave Aldo all 3 rounds.
That is insane.
How people I respect, people I like, how on earth can you give Aldo the 3rd round? He did nothing. He couldn't get anything off. And Merab was all over him. And it wasn't just takedowns, but even if it was, just holding Aldo against the fence and kneeing his legs. Meanwhile, Aldo gets one break and lands one shot to the body. You can't win a round like that. No. So yeah, I'm perfectly content and, in fact, adamant with the idea that Aldo lost this fight. It's fine. It's going to happen. It wasn't completely out of character. Possibly the elevation played a role, but I also think, as dull as it was at times, Merab fought the fight he needed to beat Aldo on this night, and did a very good, as we know about Merab, very consistent, very workmanlike fighter when he needs to be. I didn't like watching it really, but I thought he did a great job.
It was a horrific watch.
Yeah, but I still thought he did a great job. Like, sometimes you just got to have a brutally ugly fight and win, and you've now beaten Jose Aldo. Like, you know, huge credit to Merab Dvalishvili. He drowned Jose Aldo in a dreadfully dull fight, which again I will say, probably still not for the last time. Like Volkanovski before him, did get genuinely more offensively potent and effective the longer it went on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you just can't. This is one of the reasons why, as I alluded to earlier in the episode, I am so philosophically opposed to Chito Vera. You cannot just expect that you're going to win rounds by hurting people once.
Hey,
because it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Or indeed the fight. You know, if you get outpaced like that, you're going to lose. It's going to happen every time. There's no scoring metric which people are going to give you the fight under.
Yeah,
not really.
You got to actually do what Chito's been doing and actually hurt the opponent.
Yeah, that is what you are gambling on, and occasionally, and often, especially if it's someone like Merab Dvalishvili, it's not going to work. So, I mean, the main takeaway I had from this is that it was mostly like as I said, like a crappier version of the Volkanovski fight. The only real takeaway I had wasn't Aldo's passivity or even his physical degradation. I mean, the fact that he fought off every takedown attempt was incredibly impressive. Didn't think he actually looked physically that bad.
No, he looked fast.
I still don't really think.
Great defense with the wrestling for sure.
I mean, it's just it's not even the passivity; it's the cagecraft. It's 100%. The fact that he mostly just stood there and let himself get backed up.
Yes.
I think was the only real damning sign of
decline
from my perspective.
I fully agree.
I don't really think that Aldo's defense and so on is measurably, or even his is measurably much worse than it used to be. He's just fighting much quicker people than he used to back in 145 of the 145 of at this point, 7-8 years ago.
Yeah, to an extent. I'll comment on that, but please go on.
But the one thing is that is that there are two parts of the Volkanovski game plan, which were rack up point-winning strikes and then run him into the cage to burn the clock afterwards. And Merab couldn't do the first part because he's not Alexander Volkanovski.
Yeah.
But the fact that Aldo just, again, like let himself get backed into the cage way, way more than he did even against Peter Yan.
Oh, yeah.
Meant that Merab could just bum rush him.
Yeah, simple aggression would have done wonders for Jose in this fight. Just even if you're, as it appeared here, footwork has sort of deteriorated, or the multi-layer threat that Merab is bringing with all these feints and this pressure that isn't really doing anything but is constantly threatening three different things. If that's going to feed into an old fighter's already like extant tendency to hesitate and not pull the trigger as much as he used to, even if those are problems, just walking forward would have created more opportunities and prevented Merab from just banking time, which is really what won him this fight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in 100% agreement. The cagecraft was startlingly bad from Jose. I mean, and I still it makes sense. Clearly, he was concerned about the takedowns. That's why he did such a fantastic job defending them. It just added an extra sort of hitch to his defensive reactions and gave him a lot more to think about defensively. I think that led to him just not being able to get off his own offense nearly often enough. But also, his footwork in this fight was just not as good as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
That he was...
Yeah, as I said, even Yan. It wasn't that long ago.
No.
He was very hard to corral until late into the fight. In this fight, he was getting put back into the cage basically by the end of the first round, and It wasn't because Dvalishvili is a masterful pressure striker.
There's a fine line between Edson, Barboza, and Jose Aldo, and that line is footwork. And
yes.
Aldo, without his pivots and without his side steps and his nice ability to sort of transition into long phases of light floating footwork, is just not as effective a fighter. He is a planted puncher that can be frozen out of throwing his punches because he is also defensively minded, and you can just I hated it, but I also loved that Merab was very sort of like Khabib-esque, that he was like, the shot doesn't have to work.
Yeah.
Or rather, the parameters for what a shot working, what that means are different here. That me just getting in, that is the success. And once I get into the cage, it's my fight. I can then make decisions and hold him as long as I like. And Jose's always had a bit of this, where you can press him against the fence and he will just sort of ride out the clock and not be active enough. Like it happened even in a performance as impressive as his fight with Kenny Florian. There were still long phases where Florian was just grinding him against the fence. But yeah, just the margins get thinner. You get older, and I thought Merab honestly did a hideous but fantastically clever job of just...
Yeah, that was how he won. That was how he could win that fight.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how he did win that fight.
Yeah, you can't critique him and say, well, you should have lost,
Yes.
You should have fought in a way that wouldn't have worked. This worked. No denying it. So that's really all there is to say, I think. Jose Aldo's cagecraft is worst. He was overwhelmed by offensive threats in a way not unlike his fight with Volk. And he's just getting a little old, so the margins just are thinner than they used to be. And if he's fallen into this style where a guy who outworks him has to be hurt multiple times for him to win, this happens. He didn't hurt Merab. That's it.
Yep.
Okay. The co-main event, Phil. Shoe-in. Best bad fight of the year. Like Peña Nunes won. So bad in such a beautiful... It transcended bad fight.
Mm-hmm.
It really did. Did anything make sense? No. Was anything that either fighter did good? Absolutely not. They both fought a terrible fight. They were both exhausted after 5 minutes. It was a shit show. But that led to such a thrillingly competitive, unpredictable fight. It doesn't matter if it was good, because it was good anyway. And it had to be good decisions, good tactic, good technique, whatever. What you got to see was the essence of fighting, which is heart and toughness and the desire to win, and very little of the sort of fluff of skill and technique and strategy to get in the way of that. A purely like, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It got to the soul. Visceral, exactly. A purely visceral fight. I loved it. Especially because I liked it as a matchup. I thought it was silly, but I didn't think it could possibly be good. And I think it turned into the only kind of good this fight could have been, which is bad.
I think there's a way that this fight could have been good. I mean, that's the thing, is that there were like little spurts where you're like, oh.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, as soon as it started, you just look at, Rockhold just looking, as many people said, just looking real divorced out there.
Oh.
Just the hairline starting to go, the now ever-present wrap on his presumably eternally decaying cursed leg.
Yeah.
Which was I don't know.
He messed with the wrong warlock.
He deflowered some gypsy girl, and her family put a curse on his shin.
Right. He broke into like a monastery and stole like the shin bone of Saint Aloysius, and this is of course the very specific curse that now his shin bone will be forever corrupted.
Yeah. And and then you look at like a revitalized Paulo Costa with the convincing hair plug, and you're just like, he's gonna just punch his head off.
Yeah, he's too hot. There's no way he can lose.
Yeah, and then he almost does it.
Yeah.
But then somehow, like, Luke Rockhold manages to survive, and, as you say, turn it into, like, there were parts I do not think, like, Luke Rockhold is a good man. Like, despite his, the stuff that he said about the UFC, and, the fact that he's been kind of spitting truth out there about their business practices and so on, can at least be more than partially attributed to the fact that this was someone who, thought he would always be on top and is suddenly realizing that he's not going to be anymore.
And like so many great arrogant fighters, like he doesn't start speaking up until you're now useless. You see the end of your career coming, and so it's purely bitterness that is actually motivating you to say these, again, very correct and true things, but like why you didn't have the balls to do it when it might have affected you negatively.
Yeah. So, I don't think he's a great guy or anything, but man, did I find myself rooting for Luke Rockhold in this fight.
Oh, my God.
Just, like, chasing Paulo Costa around the cage, kicking him in the body. That
heroic
part where he got, where he was just getting chased. He was just getting chased around the cage, and then he got stunned, and he just shouted, "Fuck!"
Yeah.
And then punched Costa in the face as hard
He was literally, at the moment he landed the best punch of the fight, it was the fourth time in a row that he had said just "fuck you" to himself. And it was unclear if he was talking to Luke Rockhold or Paulo Costa. He's like,
or to the unkind world.
Yeah. The rage, the determination, heroic. I do not use that word lightly. Again, the essence of what we like about combat sports is to see some ultimately meaningless everyday heroism. And Luke Rockhold was a hero in this fight. Just desperate and not winning and just refusing to die and doing everything in his power to just take Paulo Costa down with him. Awesome.
Yep. Yeah.
Awesome.
Even like right at the end when he was like, "I'm not even going to get anything from this top control here. I'm just going to make sure you're covered in as much of my blood as possible, you handsome fucker."
The coolest and gayest thing I've ever seen in MMA. Against Paulo Costa, this is a man who, not like 2 fights ago, had an opponent literally hump his ass after defeating him. And yet,
these two have given us
Oh my God.
I mean, this is like these two have given us so many amazing game moments in,
Yes.
in the cage.
Yeah, and I think I underrated the extent to which that sexual tension would really just would bleed into every moment of the actual fight. Like,
I mean, the fact that also another thing, like the refs in this the refs in this event were like surprisingly good.
Yeah, I agree.
Picking out fouls. I was going to say, like, the fact that this almost came down to a dick punch TKO, which would have been perhaps the most apropos way for this fight between these two to end.
Yeah, Luke Rockhold goes out on a win because Paulo Costa just hauled off and hit him in the...
Oh, no, like, I think a lot of refs would have just called that as a stoppage for Paulo Costa, and then it would have been like...
Oh, that would have been a travesty.
Yeah, I mean, because when I saw it first, I was like, oh, yeah, he's just fucking him up.
Yeah. And
I didn't realize he just slammed a giant uppercut into Luke Rockhold's dick.
the slow-mo, the moment you realize you were wrong. You're like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah. You're like...
That was the cleanest dick punch I've ever seen.
No, the cleanest is still Yoel Romero against, is it Brunson? Because it looks so targeted.
He just like drops levels. He looks right at the dick for in slow motion what feels like a good 4 seconds, and then just sort of very deliberately pops it with a straight punch. I think that's what added to it. Just a straight punch to the dick.
That one is still That's like an Anderson. That's like the Anderson Silva precision strike of throwing punches. This one, you're like, oh yeah, he's trying to punch him in the body, but then his dick is in the way. That one just looks like a man who has decided he's going to punch someone's dick off.
That's true. Even so, a horrifically clean shot to the crotch.
Yes, I'm just seeing it in slow-mo now. Oh my God.
Yeah, it is square on, huge uppercut. Yeah, it's brutal. But yeah, Luke Rockhold, just fueled by spite.
Yeah.
Was honestly, like, it should be petty and small, and it didn't even work, but somehow it was inspiring.
It was just magnificent.
It was incredible. He just refused to die. And I had fully written him off, and the first 40 seconds of the fight went exactly as we predicted. Mm-hmm. He was just like, no, I'm too mad to lose like this. Not to this chump. Not to this handsome bastard. I'm going to make him pay. I'm going to try to mess up that perfect face. Truly a Tyler Durden moment. Right down.
It really was, yeah.
Yeah, just the rage, just like, unleashing something primal, even, with futility. Just refusing to not go for it. And my God, smearing blood all over Paulo Costa's face, ending up where you have a slow motion replay, which is like at least 3 seconds of that slow-mo replay, are Luke Rockhold just open mouth necking Paulo Costa. And Paulo Costa grinning is so homoerotic and also so cool. That was MMA. That's MMA right there.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of those ones where, honestly, the people who booked the fight were right. Because I would have been like, Aldo Marab, this is the one that you want to have in the co-main event. It's relevant, and this is just going to be an evil snuff match. But no, they were correct. This was just magical.
It was incredible.
It was magically stupid. It was everything you could have wanted. It will win tons of awards that people care about.
Yeah.
It might even win the Patrick Wyman Award for explosive muscularity.
I mean, it could be a shoe-in for both that and the best bad fight. I don't see another, and we've already had some classic bad fights. Like, there's going to be a stacked field.
Yeah.
But this transcended badness. It was so good bad.
It was great. It's one of the best bad fights I've ever seen.
It was truly a great fight while being a complete shit show, and that's part of why it was so great.
Yeah.
Any thoughts to say? Because obviously Luke Rockhold retired. I mean, again, like, what a beautiful fight to retire on. Mm-hmm. Perfect. Like, you didn't go out in a win, but this is as close as you can come to everyone, like, being a famous dickhead, just having everyone remember you so fondly for this, again, heroic performance. It was beautiful. I love that he did that. This was the moment. clearly, like, I didn't even expect him to have any moments in this fight, so as much of a win as he could possibly retire on. And more of a win than many fighters who actually do get an easy matchup in their last fight and do win, because it was not easy. So Luke Rockhold's out of the picture. Paulo Costa's not. What did you think of Paulo Costa, and does it mean anything going forward? Because I got to be honest, I thought he looked kind of bad.
Yes, he did.
He looked bad, right?
Yeah.
Why? What was going on?
It might have been the altitude, but he was just unable to put any sustained pressure on.
Yeah.
I mean, again, there were also it's hard to put it down to like a brain thinking factor, because it was such a wild, aggressive, crazy fight. But he made, he made weird tactical decisions to take Luke Rockhold down.
Yeah.
And he just couldn't keep any of the sustained pressure that we know good Paulo Costa can do. I mean, it felt a lot like the Vettori fight in that he was just there, and he's still incredibly tough. And in his own way, it felt like he was doing the kind of, like in the Vettori fight, that he was just kind of saying, fuck you, I'm still here.
Yeah.
But that he didn't actually have any idea for how he wanted to win. I
still thought he looked a lot more coherent in the Vettori fight than this.
It's because, in this fight, he was up against a punching bag.
Yeah.
And he, when you don't have any ideas, I think, Marvin Vettori was at least giving him a dance he could follow.
Right.
But with this, he was just like, oh, this guy's pretty much out of there. What do I do? It's just like, this is what you did. This was your career. You just snuffed, outmatched, and aging people.
Yeah, it's a few
and now
people,
you seem incapable of it.
Right. A few people on Twitter were raising the point, which I think there's some merit to, that because I was like, what happened to Paulo's cage cutting? How is Luke Rockhold, of all people, consistently getting out of his sights? A dead tired Luke Rockhold, who's like, his back is half turned 50% of the time. Mm-hmm. He's just walking along the fence, and yet Paulo Costa keeps inching up to him, loading up way too much, taking a huge swing, which Luke Rockhold can somehow slip with the worst looking slip I've ever seen, and then just kind of walk away, and Paulo Costa has to reset. How is he not cutting this guy off? And some people said, well, I think there's a bit of an illusion that Paulo Costa is a better cage cutter than he is because of favorable matchups. And I do think there's some truth to that. Like, you have raised this point before, I believe, that Yoel Romero, at that point in his career, was a perfect opponent for Paulo, because he doesn't move around, and he can show off some really surprisingly good defense, and he used his jab so well, and what amazing exchanges, but ultimately he was going to kind of back up and then stand in front of Paulo, and so Paulo could look like this brilliant pressure fighter. But the fact that Luke Rockhold, who is so easy to pressure, especially this Luke Rockhold, I still feel as if Paulo Costa took a step down here, that he was not in his best form. Maybe the elevation was part of it. I think part of it also was Luke Rockhold's reach, that he actually, maybe that was, again, part of the weird performance against Adesanya. Paulo does not like the idea of facing a big man who can just touch him when he's out of range. Mm-hmm. I think that was a factor, because he looked extra anxious even when he was fully allowed to pressure and just walk in. He didn't really know how to set anything up, because he kept fearing he was going to get stung with something he didn't see coming. But yeah, not at all a good performance from Paulo. And thank God, because allowing Luke Rockhold to survive led to one of the greatest stupid fights I've ever seen. But I think he looked diminished. And I don't think it's entirely because Rockhold may have been, in surprising ways, a weird matchup for him. I have to think that I'm going to be looking very closely at Paulo's next fight, because this felt like he had lost a step.
Yeah. I think, the hair plug is convincing, but it's not.
It's not real hair.
It's not the same. Yeah.
It's not real hair. And there's thinning at the back of his head now. We can all see it. Mm-hmm. You're constantly viewed from behind in the octagon, and I can see that, man. Around the crown of the head, it's very thin. You should just shave it.
Yep.
Luke Rockhold's the rare handsome man who actually looks uglier with a beard. Paulo Costa would look just as handsome without his hair. He should just bite the bullet. But he won't do it. He's Paulo Costa.
And until then, he will not be able to cut the cage. He is reverse Samson.
Cut the hair and you will cut the cage, my son. Reverse Samson. Yes, exactly. Get one of these bitches that you're the king of to cut your hair, for fuck's sake. Okay. Well, I have nothing more to say. There's very little technical to say about this fight. It was not a technical fight, but it was beautiful.
But it was amazing.
It was so good. Again, just like with Nunes Pena, I have a hard time describing why it was so good, but all I can say is that simultaneously reaching insane heights of both stupidity and visceral brilliance. It was just awesome. I loved it. And credit to Luke Rockhold. The greatest trick of all, he made me kind of like him in his last fight.
Yep. I found myself unironically just rooting for Luke Rockhold.
Yeah, man. We've all been there. Heroically just making the opponent's inevitable victory as pyrrhic a victory as you possibly can. Love
and
it.
I just loudly cackled with laughter when he punched Acosta in the face after screaming at him.
Just swearing as you're swinging on the dude. And he rocked Costa like 4 times in this fight. Costa just played it off better than Rockhold can.
Mm-hmm.
He really was tremendously successful while just losing the whole time. Awesome. Okay. Well, that's UFC 278. I want to say thank you once again to a friend of the show and personal friend, Kyle McLachlan. Always a delight to have him on. Once more, I will advise you to go check out his excellent podcast, Combat Chronicles. He does some of the kind of stuff we do, but it is honestly focused on the stuff I wish I could do better. The storytelling side, the history of combat sports. You are going to get great insights into legendary rivalries and legendary fighters. You're going to hear their backstories. You're going to know all the things that are motivating them, and you're going to look back 20, 30 years. And that Pride series he's about to do sounds great. That sounds like something that Kyle in particular will be really well suited to making compelling and entertaining, while also lots of interesting little factual tidbits and stuff that you probably weren't aware of before. So check out Combat Chronicles on Patreon. Thanks again to Kyle. If you want to yell at Phil and me about our opinions, or perhaps at one of us about incorrect takes on fighters like, for example, Cheeto Vera, find us on Twitter at Evil Greg Jackson. That's Phil. At Boxing Bush. That's me. Also check us out on Patreon. There's only 8 days left in the month as of right now. I am going to get you a commentary on Morales Pacquiao 1. That is my next boxing commentary. So that will come to you before the end of August. And until next week, thank you all so much for listening. We'll talk to you then. If you came here today for the Finer Points of Face Punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.